On the 6th of September 1943, the 91st Bomb Group lost a B-17 to fighter attack over Stuttgart. The aircraft was hit by 20mm cannon fire and went down with the ball turret extended. The ball turret gunner, Staff Sergeant Raymond Porter, was trapped inside. The aircraft crashed in a field near Bad Cannstatt. Porter was killed on impact. The wreckage was examined by intelligence officers. They found Porter's body still in the ball turret. He had been firing until the moment of impact. His guns were empty. The turret rotation mechanism had been damaged by cannon fire. Porter couldn't rotate the turret to the exit position. He couldn't get out. He died at his post. Arcangelo knew Porter. They had trained together at Kingman. Porter was 19 years old. From Oregon, he had volunteered for ball turret duty because he was small enough to fit and because the position paid an extra $50 per month. Porter had been a good gunner. Not great, but competent. He followed doctrine. He did what the manual said. The manual didn't tell him how to survive a turret jam. The manual assumed the turret would always function correctly. It didn't. Arcangelo thought about Porter every time he climbed into his own turret. He thought about what would happen if the rotation mechanism failed. The ball turret was a death trap under the best conditions. Under combat conditions, it was a statistical certainty. Arcangelo accepted this. What he couldn't accept was dying because his weapon didn't work correctly. The modified buffer became Arcangelo's edge. Every mission was a test. Every engagement was data. Arcangelo kept a notebook. Range, crossing, angle, lead calculation. Result: the data showed patterns. Beam attacks from 9 o'clock were easiest. 3 o'clock attacks required tracking across the aircraft's centerline. Head-on attacks were impossible. The turret couldn't elevate high enough. Tail attacks were marginal. The B-17's tail assembly blocked the field of fire above 10 degrees elevation. Arcangelo used this data to predict where fighters would attack from. The Luftwaffe wasn't random. They attacked from angles that minimized their exposure to defensive fire. They knew the B-17's blind spots. They exploited them. Arcangelo learned to anticipate. If the formation was flying northwest, fighters would attack from the south, from behind and below. If the formation was turning, fighters would attack from the outside of the turn, from the beam. If the formation was over the target, fighters would attack from above. From 12 o'clock, Arcangelo positioned his turret before the fighters appeared. He was already tracking when they came into range. This gave him an extra second. Sometimes that second was the difference between a kill and a miss. By October 1943, Arcangelo had refined his technique to a science. He knew the optimal lead for every crossing angle. He knew the maximum effective range for the .50 caliber against different fighter types. The Bf-109's cockpit armor stopped .50 caliber rounds at ranges beyond 500 yards. The FW-190's radial engine could absorb multiple .50 caliber hits and keep flying. The only reliable kill zones were the wing roots and the fuel tanks. Wing root hits caused structural failure. The wings separated and the fighter went into an uncontrollable spin. Fuel tank hits caused fires. The fighters had no fire suppression systems. A fuel fire meant the pilot had approximately 15 seconds to bail out before the aircraft exploded. Most pilots didn't make it. Arcangelo aimed for wing roots. The target area was approximately 36 inches wide and 24 inches tall. At 400 yards, this represented an angular target size of .0024 radians. The .50 caliber bullet had a dispersion of .002 radians at that range. The margin of error was .0004 radians. This meant Arcangelo's aim had to be perfect within approximately 10 inches at 400 yards. He could do this consistently because the modified buffer eliminated the variable of barrel climb. The gun stayed where he aimed it. He compensated for lead. he compensated for target speed. He did not have to compensate for recoil. This made him the most accurate ball turret gunner in the 8th Air Force. The Luftwaffe had learned something important about B-17 formations by October 1943. They had learned that American gunners struggled with deflection shooting. A fighter attacking from dead ahead or dead astern was relatively easy to hit. A fighter attacking from the beam, crossing at 90 degrees at 300 miles per hour required the gunner to lead the target by several aircraft lengths. Most gunners couldn't do it consistently. The Luftwaffe exploited this weakness. Fighters attacked from the beam in waves, 4 or 5 at a time, rolling through the formation at high speed, firing short bursts, breaking away before the bomber gunners could track them effectively. Arcangelo had discovered something during gunnery training at Kingman, Arizona, in early 1943. He discovered that if he fired in controlled 2-round bursts instead of sustained fire, he could keep the gun on target through recoil. The M2 Browning fired at 800 rounds per minute. A standard burst was 15 to 20 rounds. Arcangelo's bursts were exactly 2 rounds. This gave him time to adjust his aim between bursts and track a crossing target continuously. The technique was not in the gunnery manual. The instructors at Kingman told him sustained fire was more effective for suppressing enemy fighters. Arcangelo ignored them. The 91st Bomb Group had departed Basingbourn at 0947 that morning. 376 B-17s from 8 bomb groups. Target ball-bearing factories at Schweinfurt. The factories produce 52% of Germany's ball-bearing output. Destroying them would cripple German tank and aircraft production. Intelligence estimated 200 to 300 Luftwaffe fighters would intercept. The estimate was conservative. The first fighters appeared at 11:18, 20 minutes after the formation crossed into German airspace. Foch, Wolf 190s, 8 of them. They attacked from 12 o'clock high, diving through the lead squadron. Arcangelo watched them pass overhead. Ball turret gunners couldn't engage fighters attacking from directly above. The turret's maximum elevation was 85 degrees. Anything higher was a blind spot. The FW-190s knew this. They exploited it. At 11:27, a second wave attacked from 3 o'clock level. 4 FW-190s. Arcangelo rotated the turret to engage. The fighters were crossing left to right at 280 miles per hour range, 500 yards. He led the first fighter by 3 ship lengths and fired. 2 rounds. The tracers fell behind. He adjusted, led by 4 lengths, fired again. 2 rounds. A hit. White smoke from the FW-190's cowling. The fighter broke away, trailing vapor. Not a kill, not yet. But damaged. The third wave came at 11:34. 6 BF-109s from 9 o'clock low. This was the attack geometry Arcangelo had been waiting for. Low beam attacks allowed the ball turret to engage with maximum effectiveness. The turret could track smoothly through horizontal rotation. No elevation changes required. Arcangelo selected the lead 109 range, 400 yards, crossing speed, 300 miles per hour. He led by 5 ship lengths and fired 2 rounds miss. He adjusted immediately, led by 6 lengths, fired 2 rounds hit. The BF-109's left wing root erupted in orange flame. The fighter rolled inverted and dropped away. Confirmed kill. The modified recoil buffer was working. Arcangelo could feel the difference. The gun stayed on target between bursts. He could track the fighters through their entire crossing pattern without losing sight picture. At 11:39, another wave. 4 BF-109s from 3 o'clock high. Arcangelo engaged the trailing fighter. 2 round burst. Hit. The 109's canopy shattered. The fighter continued straight and level for 3 seconds, then nosed over into a dive. Pilot dead. Confirmed kill. The Luftwaffe adjusted. At 11:46, They sent 8 fighters simultaneously. 4 from 3 o'clock, 4 from 9 o'clock, crossing attack. The bomber formation's defensive fire had to split between 2 threat vectors. Arcangelo stayed on the 9 o'clock fighters. The waist gunners handled 3 o'clock. He tracked the second fighter in the 9 o'clock wave range. 350 yards, 2 round burst, hit engine fire. The Bf-109 broke left and descended. Confirmed kill. By 11:51, Arcangelo had fired 127 rounds. The ball turret ammunition capacity was 270 rounds per GUN. He had 143 rounds remaining. The formation still had 41 minutes to target. Then 90 minutes back to friendly airspace. The Luftwaffe wasn't stopping. Another wave at 11:54. 6 FW-190s from 6 o'clock high. Arcangelo rotated the turret 180 degrees. The fighters were attacking from astern, diving at 30 degrees. He engaged the lead fighter at 600 yards. 2 round burst miss. The FW-190s were closing fast. At 400 yards, he fired again. Hit. The fighter's propeller disintegrated. Metal fragments peppered the fuselage. The FW-190 snapped, rolled right and collided with his wingman. Both fighters exploded. 2 confirmed kills from a single burst. The oxygen system alarm activated at 11:58, yellow light. 10 minutes remaining. Arcangelo's breathing was already labored. The ball turret position received supplemental oxygen through a tube connected to the aircraft's main system. The system was designed for operations at 25,000 feet for a maximum of 6 hours. The formation was at 27,000 feet. They had been at altitude for 7 hours and 38 minutes. The system was failing. Strickland didn't deviate. His approach was straight. Wings level 55 feet altitude. At 1,200 yards, he opened fire. 8 guns. The convergence point was 800 yards. At that range, all 8 bullet streams intersected. The concentration was impossible to survive. The first AA gun mount fell silent at 900 yards. The crew was dead. The second mount stopped firing at 750 yards. The shield was shredded, the gun mechanism destroyed. The third and fourth mounts kept firing. Professional crews, they maintained their positions despite incoming fire. Rounds hit Strickland's aircraft. The left engine cowling took 3 hits. 1 round penetrated the cockpit, passed between the pilot and co-pilot, exited through the roof. Nobody was hit. Lucky, at 1,000 yards, the bombardier released 2 500-pound bombs, 4-second delay fuses. The bombs hit the water at 265 miles per h. Our skipped once, twice, struck the hull at the waterline. They penetrated 6 feet before the fuses initiated. The explosions occurred inside the forward cargo hold. The hold was loaded with ammunition and fuel drums for Lahi's garrison. The secondary explosion was massive. The ship's bow section separated from the rest of the hull. The forward 80 feet broke away, rolled to starboard, sank in 40 seconds. The stern section remained afloat for another 3 minutes before capsizing. Estimated crew, 180. Estimated survivors, less than 20. The water temperature was 84 degrees. Survival time was measured in hours, not days. The nearest rescue assets were at Rabaul, 180 miles away. Nobody came. By 11:30 hours, 4 cargo ships were sinking. 3 more were dead in the water, engines destroyed, unable to maneuver. The destroyers tried to provide covering fire, but their 5-inch guns couldn't track targets moving at 230 miles per h at 50-foot altitude. The engagement range was too close. By the time a destroyer's crew acquired a target, the B-25 was already past them. The convoy commander ordered the remaining ships to scatter. Individual vessels would proceed independently to Lad. The formation was broken. Some ships turned back toward Rabaul. Others continued toward La. 3 destroyers remained to screen the crippled transports and pick up survivors. The mission was failing. The third wave hit at 1400 hours. 12 B-25's, all gunships. Gunn flew this sortie personally. He targeted a 7,000-ton cargo ship that was still moving at 12 knots trying to escape. The ship's crew had learned. Aka gunners stayed at their positions despite the incoming fire. They were professionals. They kept shooting. Gunn's approach was textbook. Straight run, wings level, 55 feet above the water. Range close to 1,200 yards. Aka tracers reached out toward him. 25mm rounds passed over the canopy. Under the wing, too close. He didn't deviate. At 1,000 yards, he fired. 8 guns hammering. The convergence point was set for 800 yards. All 8 streams of fire met at that point, creating a concentration of bullets impossible to survive. The ship's forward AA mount disintegrated. The gun shield shredded. The crew died. The next mount stopped firing. Then the next, by 600 yards, the ship's defensive fire had ceased. The bombs released. 2 skips, direct hit. The explosion tore through the cargo hold. Secondary explosions followed. Ammunition. The ship broke in half. The stern section sank immediately. The bow section remained afloat, vertical in the water, for nearly 90 seconds before sliding beneath the surface. Gunn pulled up and banked right. His aircraft had taken hits. 3 25mm rounds through the left wing, 1 round through the horizontal stabilizer. The damage was worse than it appeared. 1 25mm round had severed the primary aileron control cable. Gunn was flying on the backup cable alone. If it failed, he would lose roll control. At 150 feet over the Bismarck Sea, no time to recover. He didn't know about the severed cable. The controls felt slightly heavy, but that seemed normal for battle damage. He maintained formation, throttled back to cruise power, began the 90-minute flight to Port Moresby. 30 minutes into the return flight, the co-pilot noticed hydraulic fluid leaking from the left wing root, a thin red stream vaporizing in the slipstream. Gunn reduced power, descended to 500 feet to reduce stress on the damaged structure. The leak continued but didn't worsen. The formation reached Port Moresby at 1520 hours. Gunn entered the landing pattern, extended gear, main gear, locked. Nose gear showed unsafe indication down but not locked. If it collapsed on landing, the aircraft would nose over, probably burn. He cycled the gear. Second extension showed green, locked. The approach was normal until 200 feet. The left wing dropped suddenly. The backup aileron cable was fraying. Gunn added right stick, held wings level. Touched down on the main gear, gently lowered the nose. The gear held. He taxied to the flight line and shut down. Maintenance found the severed cables, the hydraulic leak, the bent nose gear mechanism, 3 separate failures. Anyone could have killed him. He'd flown 90 minutes on failing systems without knowing it. The third wave had destroyed or crippled 6 more ships. The convoy had ceased to exist as an organized force. The battle continued through the 4th of March. 5th Air Force flew 109 sorties that day. The targets were scattered across 40 miles of ocean. Individual ships trying to reach Lai or return to Rabaul. Destroyers attempting rescue operations. Lifeboats full of survivors. The attacks were systematic. B-25's hunted anything that moved. P-38's strafed lifeboats. The orders were clear. Destroy the convoy completely. No survivors to reinforce lay-by. Sunset on the 4th of March. The count was final. All 16 transport ships sunk. 4 destroyers sunk. 4 more destroyers damaged. Barely made it back to Rabaul. Estimated Japanese casualties, 3664 troops drowned. The remainder, approximately 3,200 men, were scattered across lifeboats and rafts. Some would be rescued. Most would die of exposure, dehydration, or shark attacks before rescue arrived. The 51st Division was destroyed as a combat unit. It never reached Lae. The statistics were unprecedented. 5th Air Force flew 335 sorties over 3 days. They expended 81 tons of bombs, 115,000 rounds of .50 caliber ammunition, 3,100 rounds of 20 mm ammunition. The cost: 5 aircraft lost, 2 B-25 shot down by AA fire, 1 B-17 lost to mechanical failure, 2 P-38s lost in fighter engagements with Zeros that arrived too late to protect the convoy. 13 aircrew killed. 42 aircrew returned safely. The kill ratio was extraordinary. 16 ships sunk. 4 destroyers sunk for 5 aircraft lost. Previous convoy attacks had achieved ratios of 2 or 3 ships per aircraft lost. Bismarck C was 4-1. The difference was the gunships. Their forward firepower allowed them to suppress AA fire effectively enough that other bombers could attack with reduced losses. Gunships accounted for a disproportionate share of kills. The 12 modified B-25's flew 47 sorties over 3 days. They recorded 23 direct bomb hits on cargo ships. More importantly, their forward firepower suppressed enough AA fire to allow other bombers to make successful attacks. The standard B-25's following the gunships experienced 60% lower loss rates because the gunships had already killed the AA crews. The losses were acceptable. 5th Air Force lost 5 aircraft during the 3-day battle, 2 B-25's, 1 B-17, 2 fighters. None of the losses were gunships. The heavy forward armament proved to be defensive as well as offensive. Japanese fighters approaching from the front encountered 8 guns instead of 2. Several attempted head-on attacks broke off when they realized what they were facing. 5th Air Force Command noticed. On the 8th of March, 1943, General George Kenney ordered formal evaluation of the gunship modification. Engineers from North American Aviation flew to Port Moresby to inspect the aircraft. They examined the gun mounts, measured center of gravity shift, calculated stress loads, interviewed pilots. Their conclusion was that guns modification was crude but effective. The welds were acceptable. The gun mounts were stronger than necessary. The center of gravity shift was significant but manageable. The modification could be standardized, but there were concerns. The steel nose added 380 pounds. The guns and ammunition added 847 pounds. Total weight increase 1,227 pounds. That reduced the aircraft's bomb load by approximately 1,200 pounds. A standard B-25 could carry 3,000 pounds of bombs. A gunship could carry 1,800 pounds. The trade-off was acceptable for anti-shipping missions. Against ships, suppressive firepower mattered more than bomb tonnage. 2,500-pound bombs could sink a transport if they hit the right location. The 8 forward guns ensured you survived long enough to deliver those bombs. Against land targets, the equation was different. Suppression wasn't required. Maximum bomb tonnage was preferred. The gunship configuration was mission-specific, not universal. North American Aviation designed an official gunship package in April 1943. The B-25G model mounted a 75 mm M4 cannon in the nose, plus 2.50 caliber guns. The 75 mm cannon came from the M4 Sherman tank. Muzzle velocity, 2,030 feet per second. Effective range against ships, 2,000 yards. The weapon could destroy a ship's bridge with a single hit, but the cannon was manually loaded. Rate of fire 4 rounds per minute. In the time it took to fire 175 mm round, 8.50 calibers could fire 680 rounds. Both approaches had merit. The B-25H model, which entered production in July 1943, mounted a 75 mm cannon, plus 4.50 caliber guns forward. The additional machine guns provided suppressive fire, while the cannon engaged hardened targets. The combination worked better than either weapon alone. But crews still preferred the Gun configuration. 8.50 calibers delivered consistent, reliable firepower without the recoil problems of the 75mm. The B-25J model final production variant offered a factory installed solid nose with 8.50 caliber guns. Exactly what gun had built in a depot maintenance shop 9 months earlier. The B-25J entered service in December 1943. Production totaled 4318 aircraft. More than half of all B-25's built were J models. The gunship configuration became the standard, not the exception. By that time, Gunn had already modified 58 aircraft in theater. His depot at Port Moresby became the unofficial standard for gunship conversions. 5th Air Force didn't wait for factory aircraft. They converted existing B-25Cs and B-25 using guns methods. By mid-1944, approximately 60% of B-25s in the Southwest Pacific were gunships. The remaining 40% were retained in standard configuration for missions requiring maximum bomb load. The modifications spread beyond 5th Air Force. 10th Air Force in China-Burma. India began converting their B-25s in June 1943. 12th Air Force in the Mediterranean followed in August. By 1944, every theater where B-25s operated had some percentage of gunship, configured aircraft. The exact percentages varied by mission requirements, but the concept was universal. Combat results validated the approach. Between March 1943 and August 1945, B-25 gunships in the Southwest Pacific destroyed or damaged over 1,200 Japanese vessels. The majority were small craft, barges, patrol boats, coastal freighters, but the total included 47 destroyers, 23 submarines, and 118 larger transports. The gunships also destroyed 413 aircraft on the ground and damaged another 287. Ground targets included bridges, trains, vehicles, and fortifications. The cost was measurable. Gunship squadrons experienced 23% higher loss rates than standard bomber squadrons. The low-altitude tactics required for effective strafing exposed aircraft to concentrated AA fire, but kill, per sortie rates were 340% higher. A gunship squadron could destroy more targets per mission than a conventional bomber squadron, despite higher losses. The mathematics favored the gunships. The tactical doctrine evolved rapidly. Gunships were grouped into dedicated strafer squadrons. They operated at low altitude, attacking ships, barges, coastal installations, airfields. The heavy forward armament allowed them to destroy targets that required multiple passes by standard bombers. Tactics evolved through combat experience. Optimal attack profile. Approach at 200 feet, open fire at 1,200 yards, release bombs at 800 yards, exit at maximum speed. Ammunition management became critical. Crews learned to ration fire short bursts, controlled trigger pulls. A well-disciplined crew could engage 3 or 4 targets on a single mission. The psychological impact on Japanese forces was significant. Radio intercepts from mid-1943 showed increasing references to Devil bombers. Japanese AA crews reported standard defensive tactics were ineffective. Some crews abandoned positions when gunships appeared. Japanese forces adapted their defensive tactics. AA guns were placed in hardened positions. Gun crews were trained to continue firing despite incoming fire. Some positions were partially buried, reducing exposure to strafing. The improvements helped, but couldn't compensate for the fundamental problem. 8.50 caliber guns delivering 2,300 rounds in 20 seconds could destroy almost any defensive position if the pilot was willing to close to 400 yards. American crews were willing. Paul Gunn flew 56 combat missions in his modified B-25s. He was promoted to lieutenant colonel in August 1943. He received the Distinguished Service Cross for actions during the Bismarck Sea Battle. The citation mentioned his extraordinary heroism and technical innovation. He continued modifying aircraft throughout the war. His depot at Port Moresby converted B-25's, A-20s, and B-24s into various gunship configurations. Some modifications were adopted officially, others remained field expedients. Gunn's most ambitious project was the B-24 gunship. Standard B-24 armament included 2 forward-firing .50 caliber guns in the nose turret. Gunn wanted more. In July 1943, he modified a B-24D to carry 14.50 caliber guns, 8 in the nose, 6 in waist positions. The combined rate of fire exceeded 5,000 rounds per m in Ute. The aircraft was tested against a captured Japanese destroyer anchored near Port Moresby. The destroyer had been scuttled by its crew. Gunn used it for target practice. The modified B-24 approached at 100 feet, opened fire at 1,200 yards. 14 guns. The destroyer's superstructure disintegrated in 30 seconds. Gun mounts were destroyed. The bridge collapsed. Ventilators shredded. After 90 seconds of sustained fire, the destroyer was unrecognizable. The test proved the concept, but the B-24 gunship never entered production. The aircraft was too large, too valuable as a strategic bomber. Converting them to strafers was deemed wasteful. Only 3 B-24 gunships were built, all by Gunn's depot. They flew fewer than 40 missions before being converted back to standard configuration. The A-20 gunship was more successful. The Douglas A-20 Havoc was smaller than the B-25, faster, more maneuverable. Gunn modified 12 A-20s with 6 forward, firing .50 caliber guns. The reduced weight compared to the B-25 allowed higher speeds and tighter turns. The A-20 gunships were used for low-altitude strafing missions where speed and agility mattered more than heavy firepower. They operated alongside B-25 gunships, providing complementary capabilities. Gunn survived the war. He returned to the Philippines after liberation and resumed work with Philippine Airlines. He died in 1957 at age 56. Heart attack. His obituary mentioned his airline career and his service during the war. It didn't mention the B-25 modifications. Most people never knew. The B-25 gunship became one of the most successful modifications of World War II. Over 1,000 aircraft were converted or built with forward-firing armament packages. They served in every theater where the B-25 operated: Southwest Pacific, China-Burma, India, Mediterranean, Eastern Europe. The results were consistent. Gunships destroyed targets that conventional bombers couldn't engage effectively. The innovation succeeded because it solved a real tactical problem using available resources. High-altitude bombing couldn't hit moving ships. Low-altitude skip bombing required suppression of AA fire. Standard bombers couldn't provide that suppression. Gunn's modification could. The solution was simple, crude, and brutally effective. Military organizations rarely approve field modifications that violate engineering specifications. Gunn's modification should have been rejected. The center of gravity shift violated flight safety parameters. The gun mounts weren't engineered to standard. The modification had no official approval, but the results were undeniable. The Bismarck Sea Convoy was destroyed. 16 ships sunk in 3 days. The 51st Division never reached Lae. 5th Air Force chose results over regulations. General Kenney authorized the modification retroactively. North American Aviation incorporated it into production aircraft. The bureaucratic process that normally took years happened in months. The difference was combat necessity. When doctrine fails and improvisation succeeds, organizations adapt or die. The B-25 gunship's legacy extended beyond World War II. The AC-47 gunships used in Vietnam employed similar concepts: heavy forward, firing armament, low-altitude attacks, suppression of ground fire while delivering ordnance. The AC-130 gunship lineage traces directly back to Gunn's modifications at Port Moresby in 1942. Same tactical philosophy, different technology. The aircraft that proved the concept, B-25's serial number 41 to 12,445, survived the war. It flew 93 combat missions. After the war, it was returned to the United States and placed in storage. In 1952, the aircraft was scrapped. No museum wanted it, nobody understood its significance. The first B-25 gunship became Razor Blades. Paul Gunn never received formal recognition for his innovation during his lifetime. The Distinguished Service Cross cited his heroism, not his technical work. The modification bore no official designation, no gun packager, or gun modification, in military documentation. Just thousands of aircraft modified according to methods he developed in a maintenance depot, while engineers said it couldn't be done. That is how real innovation happens in combat. Not through official channels, not through approved procurement, through people who see problems and solve them with available resources regardless of what the regulations say. Gunn saw bombers that couldn't hit ships. He had machine guns and steel plate. He connected the need to the solution. Everything else followed from that. 12 ships sunk in 72 hours, not by doctrine, by improvisation.